The interesting thing about the Vedanta is it gives a very broad scope, all-inclusive scope for anybody. Supposing today you say you have two options, you can be a theist or an atheist, somebody who believes in God and somebody who does not believe in God. But you see, this question of belief is a little bit misleading because everybody believes in something or other. And if an atheist says, I don't believe in God, then that's their belief. And if they say, no, 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 it's a non-belief, you say, but you believe it, don't you? And they have to say yes. So there are many ways, really, because if we want to understand the truth, that is the final conclusion of any spirituality, that is religion being an inner search rather than something that is external to us. Swami, you can understand the definition of religion is realization. Realization of what? And then all the great, great mystics and those who are personalities around which a religion develops will all be saying the same thing, using maybe some different words. Some may say nirvana, some may say kingdom of heaven, some may say discovery of the Atman within. Some may say illumination or revelation. It doesn't really matter what language you use. At the very deepest, deepest part of our own being, our discovery is the same. And what's in the way, what obscures us from this discovery? Well, these are waves or unclarifications in the mind, disturbances in the mind. And so Jesus will say in the Beatitudes, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. If you want to see this reality, this God within, then it's necessary to purify. Well, heart is Oriental speak for mind. Why should that be so? Well, it doesn't take an enormous amount of investigation to know and understand that if we look at what's happening in the mind at any given time, we'll see it's filled with all kinds of things. Earlier, we were talking about somebody registering complaints. If you complain, the mind is full of complaints. If you have a criticism, the mind is full of criticism. If you have anger, the mind is full of anger. Similarly, if you have love, the mind is full of love. If you have praise, the mind is full of praise. If you have devotion, the mind is full of devotion. What do we mean by devotion? Some of the waves that we have in the mind are to do with devotion, and the devotion is largely egocentric devotion. We are devoted, no doubt, to people we love. We may be devoted to our work. We use this word devotion for a number of different activities. But, of course, when we talk about devotion, heartfelt devotion, we are really talking about devotion to people. Devotion to family, let us say, or devotion to a cause that is for the good of humanity. But the kind of devotion that is necessary to refine the mind is really orientated around that kind of devotion that we can describe as love of God. And the uniqueness in the Vedanta system is that there are other ways other than this devotion. Because the mind has a number of different avenues, different faculties, a thinking faculty, it has a feeling faculty, it has a willing faculty. There's a capacity to explore deeply and harmonize everything through meditation. For this reason, the Vedanta prescribes 4 principal means, commensurate with the 4 aspects of the mind, the psyche, because it is the mind that deceives you and the mind that liberates you. And that is why somebody who is just a person called Gautama Siddhartha, a Nepalese prince, becomes a Buddha, that is somebody who have enlightened intellect. So it's this enlightened intellect that is referred to as the pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart. Once you purify and clarify that. Clarify it of what? Principally egocentric activities, egocentric thoughts. Why is that? Because our whole world is really a kind of bubble around me plus others. Then I have to form some kind of strategy to get happiness, satisfaction, joy from the outside, ignoring the fact that all the richness is on the inside. Now, most other religions, let us exclude Vedanta, even its child Buddhism, will say, even without that love of God, you can get the highest. You just have to clarify the mind. One avenue is through psychology. Another is to do with practical philosophy, analysis of the world. Another is to do with making sure that every activity becomes devoid of difficulties or devoid of stress, anxiety. But the richest of all of these will surely be mobilizing all our emotions. So if you take Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they are centered really around love of God. And they express it in their different ways. Now, then we have to see, well, this God, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And some may say, we don't know, but there are certain qualities. The benevolence, the omnipresent, the omniscient, the omnipotent, the one who is a creator, the one who operates this universe, this creation, in a systematic, rhythmic way, so that it runs with a beautiful rhythm. And everything is according to that will. That's one way of seeing it. But you see, how do you relate to that? No doubt you can, as a kind of presence, amorphous presence. But then other religions will require a morphology. They will require some anthropomorphic version. Even the impersonal will be a kind of anthropomorphic version. And so, to take a model like that, probably a living model, let us take some examples. If you study the 19th century mystic Ramakrishna, you cannot find a more ideal model, a perfect ideal, who so reflects God that we can easily say, what other impression will we have? Or 2,000 years ago, a Jesus who walked the land and sacrificed his human body. And what other model of self-sacrifice could there be? So that remains in living memory, as it were, for several thousands of years. Going back 5,000 years ago, some personalities will be there, or 500 years before Jesus, there'll be Buddha in outstanding memory. Such vast waves come along, and in their wake leave an impression for thousands of years. Because what other model can we use other than the ideal human? So the sweetest way, really, would be to relate ourselves to this. And even if you have no idea of an anthropic principle or form of this supreme principle, of this supreme God, even if you have, as the Judaism would say, Yahweh, still, you can still say Adonai, that is, something, some entity that is like a father, that is like a chieftain, if you will, like a patriarch, guiding people. Look at the whole story of the Exodus, guiding people out of slavery. Our slavery is there, guiding it out of slavery into the land of milk and honey, into the glorious land, and never deserting us, always remaining faithful to us. So we may forget this God, but God never forgets us. And the evidence is in our very breath, in the pocket money which we call thinking or thought, a thought current, in the resources that are being given around us. And we were discussing earlier on, therefore, surely we should count our blessings. And there's a phrase, what? Count our blessings.
Oh, count your blessings, name them one by one.
Count your blessings, name them one by one.
And it will amaze you what the Lord has done.
And it will amaze you what the Lord has done. So somebody said that here. And that sense of amazement is more than just amazement. It evokes a feeling of thankfulness, a feeling of adoration, a feeling of wonder. And religion, or the idea of a god or gods, will really maybe start off as a sense of wonder. And that is why in many, many systems you'll have a delineation of the glories which are there in the universe. And these are not glories pertaining to an insentient universe. They are glories of the giver and sustainer of that universe. So naturally, we have every opportunity to mobilize the heart in a sense of true lovingness, which is non-demanding. Generally, love is demanding. Normally, love is a bargaining process. I love you if you love me. When you don't love me, then I'll stop loving you. As long as you're my friend, you're not my enemy. Imagine. And we know in human relations how friends today can be enemies tomorrow. Very fickle. Because certain conditions are not met. And when those conditions are there, they're there because of our egocentricity, our selfishness. And so, in the Bhagavad Gita, we have a whole chapter on Bhakti Yoga, this yoga of devotion, as an alternative. What does that mean? Well, it means that there are other means. And if we compare these other means, of course, having other means, it makes it very, very universal. It says we don't have to have this love. Not this love of a specific form of the supreme principle that we call God. So discussion arises, having understood all these various things relating to an impersonal principle and imperishable, the question naturally arises. How does it arise? Well, it's a conversation, really, between ourselves and the supreme model of perfection. In this case, we call it Krishna. And the whole question is, this supreme principle, is it with or without attributes? Now, if you are to relate to any person, the person will have to have attributes, maybe attributes of their personality, but we all have basic attributes, attributes that relate to our humanity. We have the capacity to think. We have the capacity on a physical level to walk and work. And so the question will go like this. Evam satat yukta ye bhaktas tvam parayupasati ye cha pyaksharam avyaktam desham ke yogavitamaha. Those devotees, what does it mean? Those people dedicated to some kind of transcendent end. Those devotees who, ever steadfast, it means there's no point in aiming for something or doing something if it's erratic. Imagine if you want to try and pass an exam, academic exam, and your whole study is erratic. You say, did you study today? No, I'm not in the mood today. Did you plan it? No. Well, just when I feel like it. So the likelihood of success in that exam is very low. So there has to be some steady kind of devotion that arises really from a keenness, an enthusiasm. And devotion means commensurate with my enthusiasm for the world, this outweighs it. And as long as I'm engaged, playful in the world, and that captures my attention, let us say 99% of the time, then the 1% will be very small. Well, that's not really devotion. Of course, it's devotion to the world if you want, to worldly activities. But then the next thing is, does it mean then that we have to withdraw ourselves from this world? Not at all. Because you see, when you look at things properly, you'll see there's no world and God separate. The glory of God is exhibited because we see its manifestation in the world. We see the sunrise, we see the sunset. Supposing we are even in a dark room with no other environment around us, still our breathing takes place. The pulse is still there. The thought current is still flowing. Food is still being digested. So those devotees who ever steadfast worship you. And those are again who worship what? The imperishable. Everything that we can think of in the universe is perishable. The unmanifest, we can say the abstract. Which of these are better versed in spiritual practice? You see, the question arises because at the conclusion of the preceding chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, this 12th chapter, adoration of the Supreme is advocated. And so we know that this Supreme Principle, which we should call Brahman. Why Brahman? Because the word comes from a root brah, which kind of indicates a kind of urge forward, an infinite invisible that urges forward. Is both with and without attributes. And of these two aspects, which is better suited for worship? Now, worship requires an object, and yet the unmanifest is difficult to sort out. Is there an object? Should there be an object? And so we need some clarification if we are to discuss the whole idea of devotion. So what is the answer? Sri Bhagavan Ovacha, the Blessed Lord, says, Maya aveshya mano yemam nitya yukta upasate Shraddhaya paro pitaste me yukta mama mataha. Those who have fixed their minds on me. What a beautiful statement. Now, if you look at any moment at where your attention is, you'll find it's not fixed on anything for very long. It's fixed on something, no doubt, but not for very long. It shifts. This wandering mind or scattered attention is really a great, great difficulty. Its opposite is concentration. We have to take the current, we call mental energy, and it comes out in the form of attention, and see how we can use it as a probe for deeper things and how it can catch our attention spontaneously. There are many people who say, I'm a visual person, or I'm an audial person. In other words, the thing that makes it easy for me to shift my attention and hold it there is if you give me something visual. And of course, the best way of learning would be multi-sensual, where the eyes are engaged, the ears are engaged, and the kinesthetic faculty is also engaged. So to fix the mind on this personal God, on this personal aspect, must be something that outweighs all the attractions that we find in the world today. And therefore, we all require discernment. We all require the evaluation of the world either as a sense of a separate thing with many, many difficulties against us, something we have to respond to and deal with and struggle against in many ways, or is it something that is a manifestation of the divine, or we could use the language creation, that we can value. In any event, it indicates all the time, Lord, you are there, Lord, you are there, Lord, you are there. You look at a tree. You can say, of course, oh, a tree is just a thing that grows. It requires some roots, and it grows on earth, and so on and so forth, and birds in the air settle in it. And so what? There are many of them. Why would we single out a single tree? Why not take the whole forest? But you see, the miracle is in the tree and the forest, both. And the miracle in the tree, when we look at it, as a botanist would look at it, we find a miracle. Every day you may hear the sound of birds, but an ornithologist will know each sound of each bird. They will know just by listening. They will identify the bird species. They will be enthusiastic and specialists in that. So in this way, we miss a lot of the divine glory and therefore the internal joy and rapture that is available to us by not observing properly and engaging in this glorification of what we see. And then, of course, we can fix the mind on its source. So those who have fixed their minds on me and who, again, ever steadfast, no holiday for it, no break. Fixed means we do nothing wavering, and endowed with supreme faith, Shuddha, worship me, then do I consider them perfect in spiritual practice. Now, what does it mean, this word faith? Unwavering faith, unwavering conviction. It means that everything is viewed as a gift, that we are looked after. There's no need to doubt. Opposite of faith will be doubt. There's nothing to doubt and nothing to fear. We are being looked after. So we were considering in a conversation prior to this, a quotation, how Jesus said, see the lilies of the field are clothed, the birds of the air are fed. Why would we worry about anything? In fact, worry and anxiety blocks our abundance on a basic law that whatever wave comes up in the mental field and we entertain it in the realm of doubt or fear and anything else, either positive or negative, will condense and manifest just like ordering, as sure as ordering from Amazon and it delivered at your front door. We have no business to complain because every thought is equivalent to placing a cosmic order. Anyway, what about those people who with faith worship this personal, this beloved? Them I consider perfect. You see, Lord has the cosmos for his physical body. That's what we have to consider. We cannot consider, we have to go beyond the idea, the duality, to say the creation is something separate. The Creator is there sitting in heaven somewhere, kind of heavenly administrative office. And maybe there are clerks and angels and what have you running things. But the business below in this so-called creation, that's happening separately. So we have to get used to understanding the whole cosmos is the divine body. He is what is called the Parameshwara, the Supreme Lord. That is the Saguna Brahman, that Brahman who has qualities of omniscience and omnipotence and omnipresence. And that rules remaining immanent in the universe. Not only making it, but entering into it and becoming the inner controller. You see, in Antaryaman is the technical term, controlling it from within. And the thing that is on the outside doesn't know it. He is the Lord of all spiritual practices and practitioners. He's the omniscient. And his devotees, they're there dedicated to his worship. They are free from attachment because if I love with all my heart, you see Deuteronomy, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and so on. Not just a little bit. Not when it's convenient or when it's inconvenient. You keep God in a cupboard, bring him out on a Sunday or whenever, or a Saturday or a Friday, and then put it back in a cupboard for the rest. When something goes wrong, you blame it. When something goes right, you ignore it. It's just my right. They're free from attachment, aversion, and angularities, both. And the Lord, or the thought of the Lord, dominates the heart. It dominates when? Day and night, perpetually. So it's not just love. It's not just like love for a child or love for a pet. No, this is a kind of supreme love, love of the very highest kind, love of the most pure kind. They live for the service of the Lord, and every activity becomes a divine worship. They are therefore, of course, the most perfect of the devotees. Ramakrishna gives this comment. He says, it's quite all right to meditate on God, viewing him as formless. But don't entertain the thought that only your own conception of God is correct, and that the beliefs of the others are erroneous. To meditate on him as with form is also a method. You persevere staunchly in your path until you reach the realization of God. And after that, you'll come to know that all paths lead to the same goal. Now, recently, a religious leader, famous, had said, somebody who leads the vast majority of Christians, he says, all paths lead to God, and all religions are a gift from God. This has created an uproar because for any religion to sustain masses of numbers, there has to be a claim of exclusiveness. And you can back it up with scripture. But when Krishna says I and me and mine, when Christ says I and me and mine, they are talking from the position of Saguna Brahman. They're talking from the position of this cosmic mind, this eternal creative entity that enters into the world and adjusts the imbalance from age to age. There are other terms for it. Nous, logos, Neoplatonistic terms are there. In the beginning was the Word, John's Gospel. See? And we ignore that part. And then when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the light, we take that part and attribute it to a historical figure. Not knowing that when that being who took the humanity spoke, they were speaking from this cosmic level. And so, next question then that arises, are they not good spiritual practitioners who take to the adoration of that which has no attributes, Nirguna Brahman, we might say, an absolute reality? And then it goes on. Well, actually, there also can be included Dvaksharam Anyadesham Avyaktam Paryopasate Sarvatragam Achintyam Cha Kutashtam Achalam Dhruvam. Yes, those who worship the imperishable, the indefinable, the unmanifest, the omnipresent, the unthinkable, the unchangeable, the immovable, the eternal, you can go on. Yes, you get the idea, that which cannot really be conceived of. They also get there, but there are conditions. What are they? Samni yamni indriya gramam sarvatra samabhutaya. Having restrained all the senses, even minded everywhere. And even then, resorting to a cave, it's not enough. Why? Engaged in the welfare of all beings. Now, I mentioned this maybe a few talks ago, or maybe last talk, you see. So important. See, eva sarva bhuta hite rataha. engaged in the welfare of all beings. They become a light. It's not that they have selfishly got their salvation. No, their light shines for others also. So what is this Nirguna Brahman? It's indeterminate, pure consciousness. It can be arrived at by eliminating all these obstructive modifications which are characteristic of Prakriti, which we call nature. It is imperishable, Aksharam. And the universe of form appears and disappears, but this pure consciousness is ever itself. It just remains. It's indefinable, anirdesham. It is avyaktam, unmanifest. It's sarvatragam, it's omnipresent. It's achintyam, it's unthinkable. It's kutashtam, it's unchangeable. It's achalam, it's immovable. It's dhruvam, it's eternal. But imagine now what you have to do in a modern world. What you'll have to do is you have to restrain all the senses in a steady way. Now, if both ways of worship are one and the same, may we adopt any method then according to our liking? No, you shouldn't. And that is why every religion may be a little extreme. Because it will say, don't dig in 1,000 different wells. Take this as the only way for you. We have to add that. So all the theologians may well be up in arms. Because the Savior declared, I'm the exclusive way. But you can say, I'm the way, the only way, or you can say, I'm the way, with the emphasis on way, which makes Jesus, for example, a Taoist. Tao means the way. I'm the way. So, what's the difficulty? Well, the difficulty is much greater, you see, whose minds are set on the unmanifested, because the goal of the unmanifest is very hard for the embodied to reach. The goal is the same, but it's very hard as long as we feel I have a body. If you feel that you are embodied, then that's the difficulty. So, Deha Vadabihi is the phrase, the embodied. For those who feel embodied, that really relates to the vast majority of people. So though the goal is the same, as I say, the worship of God without form is very difficult for the spiritual practitioner that is soaked in body consciousness. Because this discernment will not just be a discernment about the world in general, but it includes discernment about the body, the mind, the personality. That is why when we do the Enneagram, we say that it is a mask. What is the personality? Persona, mask. It's just a mask. Acknowledging that and including, therefore, every other aspect of nature will be a variety of masks, or what we call limited adjuncts. The technical term upadhi, limiting adjuncts. There's a negative way of looking at it. A positive way would be to say these are adapters. These are divine multiple adapters. Just like a light bulb is manifesting light and restricting, as it were, the electrical current. So the worship of Saguna Brahman, that is the personal God, is much easier. And the one who adores Nirguna Brahman has to be free from body feeling right from the very beginning. But the attainment of that state isn't possible for all. In fact, probably for a very few. The spiritually advanced soul alone rises to that level. The easy and the natural course for the ordinary devotee, the humble devotee, is to proceed with the worship of God with form. Now, there's a prerequisite for that, humility. We have to, you see, we hear this statement, I am humble and proud of it. No, how can it be? So there has to be genuine humility, which says, I am nothing. But don't take it to the point of complete worthlessness, because it's not that you're nothing, but you are God's child, God's beloved child, or God's beloved servant. You can put yourself in a position whereby there is a mutual arrangement and relationship of love, a being that you can talk to, that you can listen to, that you can rely on, some being that you can take refuge in. And so many of the devotional prayers are along those kinds of lines. So, how should the spiritual practitioner proceed with the worship of God? Well, those who worship me, renouncing all actions in me, regarding me as the supreme goal, meditating on me with single-minded concentration, and then fixing the mind alone on me. Let all thoughts dwell on me. Or if that's not easy, bringing the attention back. Whenever you see the mind wander off, you bring it back. Whenever you are engaged in something in the world and you're not registering it to the divine account, re-register it nicely. And don't ever say, I am the body, or don't ever say, my mind, or don't ever say, my body. None of this should be in your language. You have to re-register the whole thing. Now the Narada Bhakti Sutras will give us some idea what this devotion means. What is the definition? Bhakti, so it goes, Satasmin Parama Prema Rupa. That is, bhakti, devotion, spiritual love, love of God, has been described as the supreme love towards Him, that is your God. So it provides us with a very simple definition. It says, in the briefest possible terms, that devotion is of the nature of supreme love towards God. But don't be deceived by the simplicity of the statement. Because what is this supreme love? And I remind you of the first thing I said from Deuteronomy. With all your heart, with all your mind, with all your energy, and remind you of what Krishna is saying, fix your mind on me. Fix your attention on me continuously in a loving way. Why should we love God? Because God is lovable. With this we understand why. Because everywhere we look, we see the loving presence of God looking after us with great, great attention. Just as a mother loves her child, not for the sake of the child, but for the sake of or herself, or a husband loves the wife for the sake of the wife, but for himself. Not that kind of love, not a selfish kind of love. It's a complete unselfish kind of love. And what about this God? This God is the Atman itself. This is the kingdom of heaven where the king resides. So this devotion is also of the nature of immortality. It leads you exactly to the same place because it cleans the mind in a beautiful, sweet way. The Narada Bhakti Sutras tells us everything we need to know about this path of love. But when we look at prayer, we can see the various components necessary. There is, of course, this wonderful prayer that Swami Vivekananda writes, and he gives a very humble prayer, and we all repeat it in the evening, but I'd like to analyze it and see if we can get some clue, some reflection about this devotion. We can say, Thou art the Supreme Being. We can declare from the start. That means that other beings are there, but you are the Supreme One. That means you are a ruler. That means you are the source. That means you are my only refuge because, just like in a city or a country, I much rather go to the head of state rather than to a small minor official. And You're indicated also by various mystic sounds that mystics have come across in their exploration, such as, for example, Om, such as, for example, Hrim, and so on. All these are mantras from the depths of mystic understanding and realization. Thou art the truth, unchangeable. Whatever you say to be true, it's a changing thing. Governments change. Even the budget changes. Conditions change. The world changes. There are no permanent habitats. But the one thing that is fixed, the one thing that is true and never wavers. And what makes this change? Nature itself was comprised of these three evolutionary forces that create change. And that change we take as a universe, and we're thankful for it. Because without these three forces, we don't have this play called the world. But this Lord is above those, in a commanding position. And yet, these components of nature proclaim the glory. Why is it important to state that? It's because we have an opportunity wherever we look, whatever we hear, whatever we touch and taste, whatever the senses are light on, individually or collectively, is an opportunity for us to see. Here's a proclamation. Look, did you see? Did you see? Did you see God? Whenever we have some kind of spiritual retreat or something, it's my habit to take people for a walk. Come on, let's go for a walk. And during that walk, at the end of it, I ask the question, did you see God? And most people who are tuned into this retreat will say, yes, I saw him in the tree. I felt him on the ground. I saw him in the leaf. And when you look at the components of nature, you'll no doubt see this glory. Even in this winter, even in this time where it's not exactly winter, there's a hardy plant, the holly. The holly is a very shiny leaf with points, sharp points. And you can see there is a blemish on the leaf. You may take it as, well, it's a bit of rust or something like that. No, it's a tiny, tiny organism that finds its nourishment in the stem of the leaf. Such a tiny organism with a whole universe of its own, undetected by human eyes. And this leaf won't be interfered with by any other creature because of the sharp thorns. So it looks as if it's evergreen, but there's tiny blemishes. Nature has a whole unexplored world if we don't have eyes to see it. If we only leave it to the specialist, ecologist or botanist, we'll miss all these things. And sometimes we can be educated and notice these things. But all of these nature's modes, these threefold modes called gunas, they all exhibit and all indicate the glory of this being, and that this being is above them. And yet these nature's modes are, as it were, praising this. Day and night, says the verse, I have failed to worship your delusion-destroying feet with a longing heart. Why feet? The feet represent just the earth. I can only look at your feet. Never mind the rest. I only catch that. That's enough for me. The poet's mind will say, it is your feet, Lord, that will carry me across the ocean of samsara. All I want is to see your feet and to worship your feet and to bow down before your feet and submit to your feet. What does the Bible says? The earth is his footstool. I fail to worship the delusion-destroying feet with what? A longing heart. We have to develop this longing heart in devotion. Just as we long maybe for success, or we long for economic stability, or we may long for family relatives, or we may long for something to eat or drink. In this way, we have to divert all of that and develop a longing heart and a firm determination also. Even if we fail, we come back to it. Never mind. You can't change anything, not even the last second of the past. To start every second is a new beginning, a new opportunity. Therefore, thou art my sole refuge. Nothing else we can take refuge in. And who are you? You're a friend of the lowly and the lost. The lower you are, the more depressed you are, the more disappointed you are. This is where you'll find the Lord. He's a friend of the lowly and the lost, never abandoning us, not like other humans. Then, what are the breakers of our worldly bondage where we can discover this, that take our attention away? Threefold are mentioned in this hymn. Devotion, aspiration, and worship. Let's analyze this. Devotion, we've already covered. That is the steady attention, steady attachment to this divine. Aspiration means I have faith in the future completely. And worship, every activity I can do as an act of worship. These are the breakers of our worldly bondage. And they are sufficient to take us to the supreme truth. But very often we talk a lot of these. Now, one thing that we can study is a book that Swami Vivekananda had actually taken the trouble to translate into Bengali. When he was wandering, it's the one book, well, it was one of two books that he always carried with him, and that was The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, 15th century piece of literature that decided religion has to be taken out of the head and put into the heart. And that what we have to do is, if we have a model of our beloved, such as Jesus, then the best way to engender devotion is imitate this life. Imitation of Christ. If you are a follower of Ramakrishna, imitation of Ramakrishna. Follower of Buddha, imitation of Buddha. If you take a great saint, imitation of that saint. What made them different? What was their unique wiring? How can we walk like them? How can we talk like them? How can we think like them? How we can practice like them? How we can get close to them? How can we emulate them in every single way? This is the Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. In this, there are 4 books within that, and amongst those there are different chapters. The 3rd chapter goes like this: Oh, to be one of those to whom truth communicates itself directly, not by means of symbols and words, whose meaning changes with time, but in its very nature. Now that requires a devotee who is prepared to listen to the quiet voice within and get the knowledge, the truth from there directly, not from books. Our own estimate, our own way of looking at things is always putting us in the wrong by taking the short view, says Thomas à Kempis. And here we are, splitting hairs about all sorts of mysterious problems which don't concern us. We shall not be blamed at our judgment for having failed to solve them. Strange creatures that we are, we forget the questions which really matter to us, matter vitally and concentrate, of set purpose on what is mere curiosity and waste of time. So clear-sighted we are, and so blind. To see once is better, and there's a commentary that goes on. To see once is better than to hear 100 times, says the Chinese popular wisdom. And how true it is. There's a big difference between reading and hearing about spiritual truths in books and sermons and actually seeing them and experiencing them directly through spiritual intuition. When theology tells us, no, it's only through this way, or it's only through that way, not all paths are ways to God. It means they didn't experience the truth at depth, where you realize all paths are ways to God. This is Ramakrishna's statement and realization, not from the head, not from theology, but actually from the root of understanding, which says, I have found the blissful ocean, and the waves are various. So there's a big difference between reading and hearing about spiritual truths in books and sermons and actually seeing them and experiencing them directly through spiritual intuition. When we read or hear about spirituality, it makes us feel nice, and it may move us for a while to try to live a better life. But a direct perception of these truths, a real spiritual experience, is a life-transforming event. A complete revolution takes place in the inner life and understanding of that individual. Externally, he or she may look just the same to others, but internally, a rebirth has taken place, a lifelong transformation that no learning, however great, can achieve. And Ramakrishna says this, one should learn the contents of the scriptures and then act according to their injunctions. A person lost a letter. He couldn't remember where he'd left it. Then he began to search, and then he found it. And then what did the letter say? It said, please send us, he's saying, 5 seers of sandesh and a piece of wearing cloth. Well, the man read it, and then said, okay, and then threw the letter away, because now I know what it contains. Now I'll go and purchase it. There was no need for it anymore. Now all he had to do was to go and buy it. When St. Thomas Aquinas was writing this greatest work of his, this Summa Theologica, he had a profound spiritual experience that totally changed his understanding, opening an altogether new reality previously unknown to him. And the result was so impressive that he stopped writing. And when others complained about it, telling him that he should continue his writing, that it was a wonderful, marvelous work that he was doing, he simply said that during that experience that he had, what he saw and felt was something so superior to anything he previously knew that whatever he had written seemed irrelevant prattle to him. Why should we be concerned, says the second part, to divide up things into classes and families? We get away from all this tangle of guesswork when once the eternal word speaks to us. From him alone, all creation takes its origin. Therefore, all creation has but one voice for us. He who is its origin is also its interpreter. And without him, nobody can understand it or form a true judgment about it. Until all things become one for you, traced to one source and seen in one act of vision, you cannot find anchorage for the heart or rest calmly in God. What a profound work this Thomas à Kempis brought about. He says, O God, you are the truth. Unite me to yourself by an act of unfailing love. I am so tired of reading about this and that, being lectured to about this and that, when all that I want, all that I long for, is to be found in you. If only they would hold their tongues, these learned folk, if only the whole of creation would be silent in your presence, and you alone speak to me. Just continuing, therefore, with the prayer that Swami Vivekananda designed as the Sri Ramakrishna Stotram. He says, those who have found the fulfillment of all their desires in thee have developed loving attachment to thee. And he's addressing this to the apostle of truth and righteousness. They overcome very soon the heat of the passions of the heart. Your very name is in truth an immortal drink to your devotees, a veritable dispeller of the waves of death. Therefore, you are my sole refuge, O friend of the lowly and the lost. What is in a name? The name and the form are the same. As soon as you say the name, the internal form that the name represents appears. And so calling on God and with God's name, we call this japa, repetition of God's name, the sound embodiment of your most beloved form of God, continuously repeated. And carry on with this, Lord, holy and sanctifying is your name. And it destroys delusion in everyone. It transforms sinners into saints. I am truly without any other shelter. You alone can lift me up. O thou, the goal of all the worlds, the goal of the whole universe even. Therefore, and it's repeated, thou art my only refuge, my sole refuge, O friend of the lowly and the friend of the lost. So you can see this requires an attitude of humility, of submission, but of intimate connection also, and a surrender which says that I happily take refuge in you, knowing that you'll give it to me, always, which means I have nothing to fear, nothing to doubt. And I have no fear or even a thought that my attention will go off in any permanent way, that you yourself will bring it back for me. So we leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on them all. Thanks.
Thanks, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.